All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all for making some time to be here today. We are going to spend the next little bit of time going over our subaward agreement. And so many of you have already seen this document, but the point of this presentation today is really to dig into what's in the subaward agreement, make sure that folks understand kind of what they're agreeing to. I do want to uplift that we are going over a lot of the high level pieces here, but we aren't going to be able to go through every single piece of it on this particular presentation. So just make sure that, we're providing this presentation as a way to kind of get you all started, but make sure that you're still reading through it. I know a lot of folks also have legal teams that are going to be reading through this as well. So just to kind of reiterate what the purpose of this presentation is, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Just as a reminder, we also have time today immediately following this meeting for office hours, should people have questions about subawardee agreements or if specifically the financial readiness questionnaire. We want folks to complete those as soon as possible. And so we have, like I said, the hour right after this booked. It is going to be a separate Zoom link, but we'll be on there should anybody have questions about how to complete any of those pieces as well. So next slide. So you've seen Caesar and I quite a bit, but we are the Justicia y Equidad team here at Green Latinos. And we're kind of helping the urban forestry team on the budgetary and kind of agreement and compliance side of everything. And so you'll see a lot more of Caesar and I over the next couple of days as well. Next slide. So we have another icebreaker. And so this one is a little bit of a trivia question, but also like sharing with the other group who is a hometown hero or famous local person from your city, and what are they known for? So feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and share, you're welcome to do that as well. All right, I'll kick us off. Um, we just had our local Pride Festival here in Annapolis. And one of the people who is from the area who is now a really well-known designer is Christian Siriano, who was on Project Runway and has dressed the greats like Taylor Swift and Michelle Obama, to name a couple of people. So we claim him as our kind of like local hero. And I see some stuff coming in on the chat. I don't want to pronounce the name wrong. Is it Tim McIlrath, lead singer of Rise Against?
Totally perfect pronunciation.
Perfect. And then Eric put Cesar Chavez lived in Oxnard for a time. System of a Down was founded in Glendale, according to Wiki. That's cool.
Uh, Little tidbit. I grew up in Pasadena, which is a neighbor of Glendale. And one of our famous folks, Jackie Robinson, went to high school at Muir High School. So we always had a hometown hero.
Steve Perry from Journey is from Hanford, and he has a park bench dedicated to him. That's cool. John and Joan Cusack are from Evanston, and one of the kids from Roseanne. Mario Lopez grew up in the city of Chula Vista. The Laguna Beach greeter is famous for waving and greeting people in the area in their cars along the Pacific Coast Highway. The original greeter was around during the 70s and 80s. There have been several. The current greeter is named Michael and dances near Main Beach for everyone driving by. That's so cool. Well, thank you all for adding those things. I didn't realize, Caesar, you grew up in Pasadena. I also grew up in Pasadena, but it's called Pasadena, Maryland, and it is very different, I'm sure, than Pasadena, California. Um, but every time I say that, people assume I'm from California. All right, let's keep going. So on here, this is the agenda for today. So there's a lot of stuff on here. We are going to go through a lot of the requirements that are in this agreement. And it is going to take a little bit of time here. Again, we're not going to go through everything. This is just meant to be kind of high level, but we want to make sure that folks are aware of what are in this or what is in this agreement as we kind of move forward. Next slide. So this is some of the high level information on the grant, and we are required to share this information with everybody who is working on the grant. And so we're sharing this information here. It is shared in the grant agreement as well. But the high level stuff here is that this agreement is made under authority of the Cooperative Forestry Assistance Agreement, as amended by 16 USC Section 2105 on Public Law 117-169, Subtitle D, Section 23003A. So there's a lot of numbers there, but we are required to share that information. Also, this particular grant was made under the Federal Assistance Listing 10.727, which is Inflation Reduction Act Urban and Community Forestry Program. And you will see in everybody's grant agreement also that there is a FAIN number, and that number is going to be the same for every entity or organization. So as you're filling out documents, the FAIN number that you will use is the one that's listed here, 24-CA-1132544-013. It's going to be the same for every awardee under this Green Latinos grant that we're managing for the Forest Service. The grant period is December 13th of 2023 through November 30th of 2027. Actually, it's through 2028. That's our grant period that we have. I want to highlight that it is a little bit different than the grant period that you all have for your award. So, but we are sharing that information with everybody. And then again, we have to follow all of the procurement information listed in 2 CFR 200. So that's just information we're required to give everybody managing these awards. Next slide. Another important piece here is that generally speaking, we are not going to be looking at amendments for this grant agreement. However, I do want to uplift that if there are requests for alterations under special or extenuating circumstances, to let us know. And we will look into if it's a possibility to make changes to this document. As many people know, on our end, we have lawyers that we went through to make the agreement, and it's been reviewed and approved by the U.S. Forest Service. And so just keeping with a lot of the federal guidelines, we're not going to be entertaining a lot of changes to the grant agreement where we don't have to. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot of the front page of this. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, like I said. We're not going to be sharing a lot of screenshots from the actual document, even though we are going to go into some of the information about this. So I just wanted to share this so that people know what we're referencing as we continue in this presentation moving forward. So next slide. So the term for everybody's grant agreement will be the effective date, which is going to be the date that the grant agreement is actually signed. Just as a reminder, we're working to get everybody contracted as quickly as possible here. There's been a push to get as many people contracted by the end of the month as we can. We know that there are a couple of reasons for a lot of different cities and municipalities that we're not going to meet that particular deadline, but we are working through creative solutions to get everybody contracted as soon as possible. And I know that Rich and Cayenne are on this call as well, who are really working closely with you all on that. And the period of performance for these grants will be through November 30th of 2027. Just as a reminder of kind of the scope and the budget for all of this information, everybody is working on a scope of work document that will be approved by the urban forestry team at the time of the agreement review. We will attach that scope of work as Exhibit A on this agreement as they're going for approval. And we also will be attaching the budget for approval by the Justicia y Equidad team as Exhibit B. So all of those will be appended to the agreement once it's finalized. Next slide. Just walking through this information, Green Latinos has a couple of responsibilities in managing this fund and this award. So we are going to be responsible for funding and payment processing. And we are still working on some of those systems, and we're going to share more about some of those, the reimbursements, for example, and a couple other pieces in the coming weeks. We are going to be processing those invoices for payment. We have the bigger picture role of managing all of the project funds that we have. We're going to be working on the monitoring and reporting, so making sure that as progress is made on all of these grants, that we're up to date. We're reporting on progress and also data and deliverables for success, not only for you all, but for ourselves as we report back to the U.S. Forest Service. And then we're also here to provide technical assistance. So if you need support and you maybe don't know where to go, definitely come to us first, and we can help fill in the gaps where support is needed as well. Next slide. So the community lead or the subawardee, which is you all watching this, you're responsible for a couple of things. And obviously the first piece is working in the communities that have been identified, and ensuring that there is program participation, whatever that might look like for your particular project. Ensuring that you're managing that and coordinating all of the pieces on the ground to get this money out the door and spent. You all also have the responsibility of making sure that your finances are in the right order and in compliant with all of the guidelines kind of set out by federal regulations. And then also you'll be responsible for the reporting on all of this as well. So go to the next slide. And again, and maybe it feels like we're bringing this up many times. You've seen this slide many times, but these are the reporting schedules that are agreed to as we work through this piece. And so most folks won't have a starting date until July. And so you can expect that your first reimbursement request will be due in October, and your first semi-annual report will be due in November. Next slide. So a couple of the other sections that are here that we're gonna hold people to is the Justice 40 and low income disadvantaged communities piece here. And so remembering that 100% of the work under the subaward must benefit disadvantaged communities. We are going to make sure that every municipality or nonprofit organization managing this funding does not have any active exclusions in the System for Award Management, or SAM. And so for those of you who know how that works, we have to do some back end kind of compliance checking just to make sure that everybody is eligible to continue managing that funding. And so everybody has to continue to maintain an active SAM registration throughout the term of this grant. And so we will be working in Salesforce to kind of collect that information. And our goal long-term will be able to send reminders as it gets near the end of whatever registration you may have, just to remind you like, hey, you need to keep this registration active to continue managing these funds. If any of the subrecipients have an active exclusion, you won't be eligible for the receipt of funding. And if for any reason along the period of performance of this grant, there are exclusions that come up, we do need to be made aware of them, and that way we can have the next steps for correcting those pieces as well. Next slide. And then some of the information that is important to share. There is no lobbying that can occur under the receipt of this particular federal funding. We also wanted to uplift a section on notifications. And so just as a reminder, if there are any problems, delays, or adverse conditions that come up through the management of this grant, you need to notify Green Latinos within 5 business days or as soon as possible, especially if those challenges or issues that come up will affect the progress that can be made under this particular grant and will affect the outcomes of the grant, because we need to have those conversations as soon as possible. Next slide. So again, for finances and for the management of the budget and administration, all of the information is in 2 CFR 200 from the Office of Management and Budget. And so we again have trainings next Monday and Tuesday that are really particularly focused on our budgets and also on reimbursements. And so please save the date. Those will also be recorded. It's also on the subawardee to make sure that all of the expenditures that are happening are exclusively for allowable program expenses. And so we'll talk a little bit on Tuesday of next week about what allowable versus unallowable expenses may be. But basically, once your budget is approved, we just want you all to make sure that you're spending the money in compliance with the budget that's been approved. Next slide. So purchase of equipment, we're not allowing the purchase of equipment under this agreement. And the definition for what equipment is in 2 CFR 200, but basically it's any type of equipment that has a cost of over $5,000 or a use period of over a year in time. And so just as a reminder, folks should look up kind of what that means. And I know that we're having the conversation with folks who might have concerns about that as they're getting their agreements in place. We also have the election of the de minimis rate here for our budgets. And so if you're a subrecipient, you have a couple of options here for indirect costs. And so if you have a federally approved indirect cost rate, you can elect to choose that indirect cost rate for this particular project. If you do not have a negotiated rate, or a NICRA is what it's called, you can choose the 10% de minimis rate as well. However, we also know how cities sometimes work. And so if it's indirect costs, that might be money that comes directly away from the project. And so you might choose to waive the recovery of indirect costs in the project. And so you're allowed to do that as well. So there's 3 options here, and we can kind of talk through what they might or might not have impact on as we work through this as well. Next slide. There is a document retention requirement that I want to uplift here as well. And so for any type of document, basically, that is related to this particular grant, any subrecipient must keep all of those documents for at least 3 years after the date of final submission of your final reports and financial statements. So basically, whenever you submit everything to us and we say you're good, things are closed out, you need to keep all of those documents for at least 3 more years. And I'm sure many of the municipalities and cities have their own document retention policies as well, but this is a standard for the federal guidelines that we have to share with everyone. Next slide. So I'm going to walk through a little bit on the insurance policies here. I'm not going to read through all of the information here, but there are a couple of things that I do want to uplift from the beginning. So all of our subrecipients must maintain insurance coverages during the period of this subaward, and those are going to be listed on the next couple of slides here. The language that we also have shared basically said that every subawardee or city was going to add Green Latinos to its plan. We also understand that a lot of cities are self-insured or have other systems in place that's a little bit different from nonprofit organizations who we also work with on this funding. And so if you are not able to add us as an additional insured on your insurance, we will ask that there is at least the recognition that your city or municipality carries at least this amount of coverage. And I have had a couple of requests to put that in writing via email. So I will go ahead and send that out for the folks that have asked for it as well. We just basically need to confirm that you can meet the limits here, and you don't have to add Green Latinos as the additional insured if you're not able to. I know there was a couple questions about that. So for general liability and property damage, The information is on the screen here. If you could go to the next slide. There is automotive liability insurance, which is listed here. I'm sure a lot of cities and municipalities have vehicles that are owned by the city that get used for various different things. I do want to note a couple things here. If you do not own a motor vehicle or are not operating them, we will have an automotive liability waiver. So let us know if you're not operating vehicles and you need a copy of that. And if you don't have any vehicles, but you obtain one during the period of performance, we will need to see that this automotive liability insurance is then in place as soon as that vehicle is going to be used. Next slide. And very similar, we do want to see that there is workers' compensation, and the requirements are on here as well. Basically, workers' compensation needs to be in accordance with whatever laws of the state in which you're working in. And so we want to see that that is in place within 30 days of the effective date of this agreement. And if you go to the next slide. Indemnification is a pretty standard clause in a lot of grant agreements as well. And so this is the uplifting of this particular clause that the subrecipient will defend and indemnify Green Latinos, all of the people involved at Green Latinos against any costs, losses, damages, and liabilities in accordance with this agreement. This is a standard clause. And again, I'm not going through all of the legal language on all of these. And so I encourage folks to, again, read this. I know you probably have legal teams as well who are going to read through this and let us know if there's any concerns. Next slide. So there are a couple of pieces here on communication and use of intellectual property. And so you are required to use the Green Latinos and Forest Service insignias for any major public communications in accordance with the scope of work for these particular projects. And so we do ask that you submit and receive approval on any of those materials in writing. And so our urban forestry team, Richna and Cayenne, are going to be kind of the lead points on this particular piece. But I will note that if you need the Green Latinos logo or the Forest Service insignia for whatever reason, you are welcome to reach out to any of us and we'll make sure that you get it. And again, this just acknowledges that you will acknowledge Green Latinos and Forest Service basically in any publications, audio visuals, or electronic media developed as a result of this award. Next slide. And again, this kind of goes into the same information, but the main points here are basically making sure that you're using our logo in agreement with whatever we do approve in the agreement. And then for purposes of reporting and for showing progress on these particular subawards, we do reserve the right to use the work that is sent in for these reports and for data on the progress of these grants as well. Next slide. There's always a termination clause, and so uplifting that here, that if for whatever reason a subawardee does not meet programmatic goals that we've agreed upon, Green Latinos does reserve the right to terminate the award with 30 days notice. And if for whatever reason the subrecipient is unable to or unwilling to comply with any parts of this agreement, they may also terminate within a 30-day notice. Obviously, we don't want to see any of these projects come to a termination. So definitely, if it seems like for whatever reason there are challenges or changes in the progress that can be made on these projects, come to us as soon as possible. I think it's in everybody's best interest to find creative solutions to any challenges that may arise. But uplifting here that this is just another clause that is legally required to have in agreements. Next slide. So there's a couple of more pieces here that we're not going to go too much in depth on, but this is again the reminder that there are a couple of other sections here that'll be important for people to read through and know and be aware of kind of what they're agreeing to here. But if you could go to the next slide. A couple of things on the notices. And so as I mentioned, there's a couple of places where Subawardees are going to be required to notify Green Latino as soon as possible about changes or modifications. And so just uplifting that a notice is officially in writing, mailed or transmitted electronically through email, or directly through our reporting system, which is our Green Latinos grant making portal. Any modifications that come in, which you're allowed to do, must be approved prior to the start of that work by Green Latinos. And in general, it needs to align with the original scope of work of this project. If for whatever reason the modifications compromise the original scope of work, or work was completed that was not approved, Green Latinos does reserve the right to deny those modifications or deny payment for any work that was not approved at the time that it was started. So I do want to just uplift those things. We are here to help though. So if you do have any challenges or concerns, I know for a fact that Caesar and I are here, and I'm sure that Rich and Cayenne feel the same way. Like, please come and talk to us if any issues come up, and we'll try to make sure that we can handle them before they become bigger challenges. Next slide. So there are going to be quite a few items that are attached to the appendix of this agreement. And so listing all of them here, a couple of them we've already talked about: the scope of work, the program budget. There are a couple of additional terms and conditions. We are sharing with everybody the notice of award that we have, so people can see all of the requirements for transparency of what Green Latinos is also agreeing to as we manage these awards. We have another exhibit on the data that's going to be collected, a whistleblower notice policy. There's an agreement here in Exhibit 2 CFR Part 170 that we encourage everybody to look at as well. And then the last exhibit to be filled out is a USDA-specific form regarding debarment, suspension, and ineligibility to manage federal funds. And so all of these will be appended to the end of the grant agreement in place. Next slide. So just as a reminder, I know that was a lot of information that we just kind of threw out all at once, but we are here to help. If you have any questions or any concerns about the grant agreement or any other parts of the project along the way. And so we have some time right now that I can open up if people have any questions. And just as a reminder, we do have our office hours as well, starting at 3 o'clock Eastern time, which is right after this presentation. And so if you have additional questions, you're welcome to join that Zoom link as well right after this. And we'll make sure that we answer any of those questions there. But if you could go to the next slide, Caesar, just as a reminder on how to raise your hand if you are dialed in or you're on our screen, we're open for questions.
Hey, this is Emily from the city of Evanston. I just have a quick question. If the majority of our work is going to be contracted, how does that work with insurance and additional insured?
So a lot of the work that you're going to be doing is like contracted out work, basically.
Yeah.
So we would still ask that we can at least see what insurance policies the city may or may not have, just to make sure that we know that they're in place, even if they're not maybe directly applicable to all of the work that's happening.
Okay, that sounds good.
Matthew?
Yeah, just a quick question. So, is the subrecipient grant agreement the only document that our agency or the signature authority, if we're working for a municipality, is going to have to sign, or is there any other documents that the signature authority for the agency will have to approve or put their signature on?
Yeah, so everything that we're currently working on related to the scope of work of this particular project will end up in the subrecipient agreement. So the scope of work documents, the budget, all of those will be there. And so this will be the only document that people will have to officially sign from your signatory authority at your cities.
Okay,
I just want to clarify that the
Yeah.
scope of work document has a signature field that also needs to be signed.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Richna.
okay,
Yeah.
so the scope of work document, once once the draft is finalized and everything, our signature authority is going to have to sign, and then that gets submitted to Green Latinos, which then gets included in the subrecipient, the agreement, and then that then also gets signed by the signature authority.
Right.
Okay, all right, good to know. Other than the scope of work document, is there any other, I just want to have the package lined up for the signature authority because it's a little difficult to get things on their desk. So doing so multiple times is a hurdle I'd like to avoid. So is there anything other than the scope of work document that needs to be signed by your signature authority off the top of your head?
No.
Okay.
And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Richna, as well, but if possible, I think it's okay to submit both of these documents at the same time for signature.
Okay,
It is.
Yep.
thank you again, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
No problem.
Chris?
Hello, thank you. So this went to our legal, and there was some serious concern on a few of the things. The biggest one being paragraph 10C, which our legal department is reading as making the city liable to Green Latinos for the 10% of the subaward if the city fails to obtain the grant funding. So in terms of if we do something to not get our money, then we're liable to Green Latinos for the 10% that you would have gotten had we did that.
Give me 1 second. I actually don't have the template open, so let me just look at that, and then I can answer your question. And you said it's clause 10C?
Yeah.
Okay. So this particular clause, I see what you're saying. So basically, the concern is that because of the indirect amount being 10%, if there's liability, the concern is basically that Green Latino, or that the city would then have to pay back like that 10% indirect. Is that what their concern is? I just want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not a lawyer as well, so I'm unsure exactly, but that was my take from it, is that the recipient should be liable to Green Latinos for damages sustained, and they're interpreting the damages would be the 10% that Green Latinos would have collected in that case.
I think if it's okay with you, let's follow up with this one offline. I think the way that it's being read is probably not in line with the goal of having that clause in there, but I might have to do a little bit of digging on my end as well. So if you just want to send an email to me, let's connect and follow up. We could even do it on the office hours right after this.
Sure. And then additionally, the ownership of in 9D, so the ownership, if anything we create, is to stay with Green Latinos.
So that piece is more in line with basically the ability for Green Latinos to use whatever is being created for our reporting purposes under this particular agreement. But if there's language that needs to change a little bit in that section, we should also dig into that a little bit more as well. But more than anything, basically, it's just to make sure that Green Latinos can use whatever is created or submitted for our own reporting purposes to the Forest Service.
Got it. Okay. And I think what I'm going to do is after this, and I have a better understanding of the contract. So I told him, let me attend this and see what's going on. And then we'll probably, I'll email with you and I'll probably have a proposed like language revise that they like as well. But it sounds like it's going to be kind of huge lifts here. So I'll talk to you offline. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Give everyone another minute or so if you have any other questions.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, yeah. This is Wang Su, City of Bellflower. I sent an email about this yesterday, a comment from our city attorney's office. This is regarding general provisions, section 11A, governing laws. In our city, for us to get anything before our city council, our city attorneys has to approve for us to proceed. Now, they found some serious concerns with that clause in there. Because they can't approve this if the agreement is governed by the laws of the District of Columbia. They are barred and licensed in the state of California. And not only that, not only can we not move that forward, they're seriously concerned about potential representation if this is to go sideways for any, Lord forbid, but, and what is the kind of the likelihood of us kind of getting this amended here?
Yeah, so for this particular clause, this is one where because of the kind of federal nature of this work, we have it listed as the District of Columbia. That is where Green Latinos is officially incorporated as an organization. But we had a couple of discussions today even that focused on basically if it's changed at all, what it would be changed to is being handled by kind of like the federal policies that are in place in particular, because they supersede any state in particular policies. But I think there might be a little bit of discussion that we need to have about what language makes the most sense to have there, because it is shifting a little bit, but the concern I think about where disputes are handled and what it looks like is a conversation that we can have in particular as it relates to kind of handling these particular pieces here. So I think we're going to also need to connect offline and just talk a little bit more about what might be approvable on your end and what we can change on our end as well.
Okay, thank you.
Give everyone another minute or so if you have any other questions.
I actually want to share also that our law department also brought up the fact that, they would want our state listed as a location, if there were any conflicts. But ultimately, like, we're going to move forward with it just because we think it's very unlikely, for a project of this type. But just sort of as an FYI, and I don't know if there's anything that can be done to change these types of agreements in the future, but that is something that was brought up by my law department as well.
So
Yeah.
I just want to step in here. Based on what we heard from our executive leadership today, the answer to that is no, that they're not going to change the jurisdiction to anything other than DC. So the likelihood of that happening is close to nil.
Okay, that's good to know.
I just wanted to make sure
interesting and
I
good to know,
clarified
yeah.
that for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks.
No problem. Mongsu, we're more than happy to get on a call with you to talk about this further for Bellflower.
Okay, and can we also just get a written response as well, just so that I can engage our city attorney's office as well? Thank you.
You'll get a written response today.
I know Richna is working on that right now, so thank you, Richna, for helping out as well.
No problem.
All right, last call for any other questions or thoughts. All right, if nobody else has any other questions or thoughts, thank you all for joining us. Again, please feel free to follow up with us. I know there's a couple people here that we're going to follow up with, but as issues come up, we're fielding them and handling them as quickly as possible. So again, please reach out to us. Thank you all for working with us on all of this. And I'm sure I will see many of you on Monday and Tuesday of next week. Final reminder that we do have office hours at 3 p.m. today, should anybody have any questions. In particular, I want to uplift the financial readiness assessment as well. That does need to be done as soon as possible. And so we want to make sure that we're answering questions there as well. So thank you all. I hope you all have a good weekend, and I'm sure I'll be talking with many of you soon.